Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aisala.
Hello, and welcome to Business as Unusual with Dr. Dora Wolfe, who's going to talk about being a mental health mentor. Business as Unusual is a podcast where we talk about people who are innovating new ways of doing business and creating a world that works for all of us. So I will let Dr. Dora Wolfe tell you a little bit more about what she's up to before we get going. And I hope you guys have some questions for us.
So hello, thank you for having me on your show today. I'm really excited. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I've been practicing for over 20 years now, working with patients. I had a private practice for 17 of those years, and was truly grateful to work with all the patients that I did. And then I made a conscious decision a couple years ago that I was going to migrate away from one-on-one interaction with patients and hopefully open up a platform where I could inspire, educate, and motivate people to make their mental health a priority. So the idea of Your Mental Health Mentor was born. And I'm getting ready to launch it right after the first of the year. And so this is my first opportunity to talk about it. There'll be webinars, podcasts, classes that you can take. And I'm really excited and hope a lot of people will come be a part of this journey with me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such a great idea and a needed niche or service. I mean, I don't have to tell you that mental health services in our country are very much needed and also very difficult to access for most people. And so I think I would be surprised that if anyone could get through sharing, some aspect of their life experience without noting a place where that lack caused them a not great impact. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think people just really need information. And I think that they need information from sources that they feel they can trust. We are just bombarded with so much on the internet now. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to kind of navigate through. And mm-hmm. One of the downsides of being someone like me, a psychologist, is that we are typically seeing people after there's already an issue and they're coming to our office. And by the time they get to our office, they're typically hurting pretty badly. Mm-hmm. And after working with patients for so long, one of the things I realized was that there is so much we can do on the front end to build resilience and to help navigate problems even before they start, and certainly in the early stages before people are finally hurting so much that they feel that they have to seek professional help. And there wasn't really an outlet for that, because in order for a patient to come see me, most patients are using insurance. And if I don't diagnose them, I can't continue to see them, right, for the insurance. So a lot of people would come in and they would just have questions. They were concerned, rightfully so, but needed information, didn't need me to diagnose them. They mm-hmm. needed me to give them information. And so that was one of the ways that I thought, if I can put myself out there and be able to give people this information, mm-hmm. how blessed I would feel.
Yeah. That's being able, and that, I mean, I know my own experience. You're making me think about it, that oftentimes what I need and what I think I need aren't aligned, right? Because mm-hmm. I'm the subject of my own observation. So that's the whole point of a professional. And so I feel like it can take some time. Like I sought therapy because I had a crisis, my mid-20s, like many
Mhm.
people. And I thought my problem was this one thing. And that wasn't it at all. But that was just where the crisis showed up. The actual
Mhm.
support and effort and work I needed to do was over here. But that wasn't evident right away. It took some time to kind of like experience that and to get some sense of like what was actually happening. So I could see
Yeah.
how, as a professional, that might have been kind of frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I work in trauma
Mm,
and attachment disorders. So I had either people who were on the severe end of the spectrum who kind of would hunker down for long-term treatment with me. And
mhm,
then, like I said, but even with their family members who were trying to navigate how to help this person and how to help themselves, or if they were going to have children, how do I prevent my child from developing a mental health issue down the road?
mhm,
There's so much that we can do. Dealing with mental illness as long as I have really opened my eyes, and my patients working with them and learning from them really opened my eyes in terms of where we can interject
mhm,
and how we can take care of ourselves before or even during treatment. Because an hour a week with a professional um,
mhm,
just isn't enough for so many people.
mm-mm.
And we
No.
need those foundations of mental health, which is everything from what we're eating to who our support system is, how we're treating our bodies. There are just all these different foundations that we really need to target and take care of
Mhm,
so that we either avoid going into a psychologist's office or we have this in addition to our treatment so
mhm.
that we can build up that resilience and we can navigate through any of these issues that we're having.
Right. Well, and I like that the prevention or the proactive approach. I also have been noodling on um this distinction between sort of like a body of behavioral work that I'm going to call sort of like the self-help but like kind of guru culture thing, and then like that investment in education and information. And part of it for me, like I have a really good friend who has been a life coach for a long time, and as her in her own experience, like that's something she's constantly aware of. Like there's this guru culture thing that is very like insidious. And I realized that like there's a dependency model to that is part of the issue that I from my very limited scope, right? But I think the other part of it is that difference between um education and being reminded of sort of like best practices or medical or information that's more objective, as opposed to that other thing, but as part of an antidote to the thousands of messages we get every day that are incredibly unhealthy and yet are
Mhm.
kind of business as usual, the opposite of my show. Like they're things that we see modeled for us in leaders and in bad
Mhm.
reactions to problems or aggrandized reactions that are actually quite unhealthy, and recognizing that wanting to constantly be presented with education that counters that is probably one of the best antidotes that we can have, because it's not modeled. Like what gets delivered to our door is not going to lead us to joy, happiness, and health, in my opinion, most of the time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that it's very alarming. I mean, I was
Hmm.
reading that there are all kinds of people popping up now with this mental health crisis that aren't even, um, licensed or don't have any sort of degree to be offering mental health services,
Hmm.
and yet they are.
Hmm.
And kids are going to all these different platforms and learning about certain things. And I know there's the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to social media and all of these platforms. So my goal is again to just be a voice and just to help people understand that you are the expert of you, and there's not a cookie cutter approach. It's not a one size fits all for everybody in terms of what may be helpful for them. But
Hmm.
my job, I have felt, has always been to educate people in terms of what's out there, what the possibilities are, And then for them to be able to use that information to decide what may be best practices for themselves or their children, their family members. I've worked a long time as a psychologist. And so when I decided to do this, it was, well, I'm not treating people right through this platform. So I'm not being your psychologist or your provider in that way. So I was looking for a word, how could I describe myself? And coach didn't quite fit and teacher didn't quite fit. And so I was kind of, I worked on this actually for several months, and then all of a sudden mentor, came up. And the idea of a mentor is somebody who, knows a lot of information and is willing to share that and guide other people with it. And that's always been part of my job as a psychologist, is to continue to learn. I have a passion for learning and a passion for mental health. And so I've always prided myself on trying to take a lot of this information that some people might not find so interesting and make it interesting for people. So that they say, hey, that makes sense. And hey, I want to do that. It's not very hard. We can take a lot of complicated topics like the brain and really make them user-friendly for people so that they can understand and grasp that knowledge and then really feel empowered to make these changes in their lives.
Something that you said earlier about like recognizing that there's not cookie cutter approaches. I really appreciate that, because I think that it's really easy. And what's it? That's an old AA saying, right? We always compare our insides to other people's outsides. So you look at the world, or, whether it's Instagram or the newspaper, back in the day, Cosmo, and you're like, oh, wow, like they've got it together. And the reality is everybody's got this squishy world inside, and we're all finding our own way of dealing with it. And I just reminding that, like, what you need, what works for you, that there's no moral judgment on that. I mean, obviously outside certain caveats, but like that, what you need to get stable and connected, if you need to be at home and not talk to people, or you need to be out and engaged, like you get to discover that. It's kind of sweet. And instead it's like, it's almost like there's this weird sort of, when we put this pressure on ourselves, or maybe it's a combination of things, to like be a certain way. And that makes it so hard to discover that. Do you have like a way that you found can help people feel more comfortable in that space of like, it's okay that you're, maybe, you need it this way and your kids need it this way? Or how does that play into any of the work that you've done?
Sure. I think it's a lot about connection and communication. And if you are truly listening to somebody and how they are navigating through their lives, and they may say, I'm not sure this is the right way of doing things, or this is the best way of doing things. Part of it is saying, why does that work for you? And they may be doing something that is, along the right path, and there's nothing they need to change. Or it might be something that they're doing, maybe they're abusing substances in some way. They say, the only way I can relax is to have 3 glasses of wine, or the only way I can relax is to smoke marijuana at night, or whatever it may be. And it's about having a conversation to say, how does that make you feel when you drink the wine or smoke marijuana? People will say something like, it helps me sleep, or it helps me to unwind and relax. And so that opens a conversation about, okay, let's talk about what's happening physiologically when you're doing something like that. And then we can talk about other things that can have the same impact for you. Because one of the caveats to using one of those other substances is that there's going to be some side effects, some things we don't necessarily like so much. And again, it's your choice. If it's something that you feel is working for you, then I am all for it. But I think that when we get into kind of breaking things down and talking about things, people can realize things like with alcohol, for example, it may help us fall asleep, but it disrupts our deeper stages of sleep. And so when I will ask people, so when you wake up in the morning, then do you feel refreshed and ready to go? And almost undoubtedly, the answer is, no.
Right.
Now I need caffeine to get me going. So
Yeah.
it's having that conversation, helping people to understand, and then talking about different options they may have, their family members have, because you're right, different things work for different people.
Well, and I feel like there's, to that end, right? Like if you have a crutch, like anything, like I think there's an awareness piece. Like, oh, I'm super amped, whatever.
Mhm.
But that awareness piece can be helpful because, yeah, I know I I got so mad at one point when I realized, like, if I had alcohol before bed, I would fall asleep way faster because I have a hard time falling asleep, right?
Yeah.
But the sugar would wake me up. I'd like a sugar rush like 2 hours later, and I'd be just
Yeah.
up, and I'm like, "No, you're betraying me."
Yeah.
And yet, and so but making that connection because I didn't know that's what it was for a long time,
Mhm.
and then someone randomly mentioned that, and I was like, "You have just ruined it. Thank
Yeah.
you, I guess, but also thank you." I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
because it was happening whether I knew it or not, and then
Mhm.
I understood, like, "Oh, okay, so I need to pay attention to that." Like, I think it's helping me sleep, and, in one perspective, it's getting me to sleep, but then wakes me up because I get a sugar rush,
Exactly.
you know?
And sleep is arguably one of the biggest issues we are facing in this
Yeah.
country. It is just it is, if people understood the impact that lack of sleep, and not even just lack of sleep, because people might say I sleep 7 or 8 hours, but that doesn't mean they're getting quality sleep.
Mhm.
And so this, being on computers and social media and all of this, we have just really put our brains through a ringer with
Mhm.
how we do things now. And so nobody is going to just simply get off their computers. We need them
Mhm.
to do all the things that we do. So we kind of talk about, okay, how do we structure our lives then to make sure that all of this has the least amount of impact? And
Mhm.
one person may be a lot more sensitive than another person. So it really is knowing yourself, understanding how things work, and then it's a lot of trial and error, to
Mhm.
say this is working or this isn't working, or that makes a lot of sense to me and I'd like to incorporate that, versus that doesn't interest me. So I'm going to kind of move on.
Right. Well, and it's interestingly, say that, and it's actually one of the things that I realized I needed to work on is simply finding a way to sleep. And I hate that I have learned so much about mental health from TikTok, but but this one person, like, they posted a video and they were talking about the difference between people who fall asleep and people who pass out. And
Mm,
not like from alcohol per se, but I was like, "Oh," I had definitely a trauma. My sleep has been affected, and then other things, right? And I'm like, "Oh, crap." I'm like looking guilty. I'm like, "I don't fall asleep very often.
yeah,
I pass out. Like I either, watch TV until I can't stay awake or, push myself with such a busy day that I have
yeah,
to sleep." But that process of like actually falling asleep is like actually sort of alien to me. And I've been like kind of dedicating myself to a little bit understanding like what's affecting it and how
mhm,
like and how do I engage myself in a healthy path to which is irritatingly something I should know how to do. I was like, come on. I should not have to learn how to sleep, but I do. And I hear
yeah,
and that's like tricky, right? Because the things that help me pass out, like TV or play like watching videos or whatever, they
yeah,
also disrupt that sleep, right? So
right, right. And I think that's what people sort of come to realize, is that we do physiologically know how to sleep and know how to get to sleep. What we really need to learn is how to get out of our own way. So
nice.
that,
Okay.
our body knows what to do,
Mhm.
but we have a tendency to get in the way of our physiology. It's all about the rhythms in our body,
Mhm.
and we do a lot of things that end up disrupting those rhythms,
Mhm.
and then our body gets out of whack and we have all of these issues. But if we just get out of our own way, our body will step in and know how to fall asleep and know how to sleep well and all of those things, the overwhelming majority of the time.
Mhm.
And so that's another thing too when you're dealing with mental health issues, is that the I call it the foundations of mental health.
Mhm.
And when I would work with patients, we would talk about Look, there are so many pathways to any mental health diagnosis that you can name.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way we live our lives so tremendously impacts that our first line of defense is always to make sure our foundational health care is in check. So that's our sleeping, that is our eating, that is our stress management, that is our connection and our social support. We need to make sure all of these are optimized, because what you'll find is that whatever struggle you have, anxiety, depression, you name it, you will start to see that recede. Now, for some people, if they get those foundational things in place, it's like magic. They no longer have the depression or the anxiety that they're dealing with. For other people, what we see is those levels come down, and then whatever we're left with, we then target treatment for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would tell people, you could have the most wonderful psychologist or therapist in the world that you're dealing with, but if you're doing that for an hour a week and then you're going home and you are in front of a computer for 15 hours, you're eating fast food 3 times a day, you are in a terrible relationship, you are climbing an uphill battle then.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really want to take charge of our health and of our day-to-day foundational life and healthcare. And then I think people are pleasantly surprised at the outcome.
Yeah, you're so right. I don't know why it's so hard. It's like,
yeah,
I know better, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then and sometimes I feel like I'm a toddler in myself against the parent in myself. Like, I'm sitting here going, well, it looks like this is what we should do. And then I'm like stomping my like mental foot going, well, I don't want to go to bed. I'm not sleepy. It's like, what is happening? I'm an adult woman. But this should not be a conversation I'm having with myself, but apparently it is.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's one of the reasons why we need support, right? And why we need somebody like a mentor that can remind us of certain things and say, hey, by the way, I get it. Like, I live it too. We're not in this field and magically we do everything right. We have our struggles. And so I think that that's part of it too, is empathizing with how difficult it can be to, make sure our sleep is in check, parenting issues, relational issues, food issues, all of these things that we're bombarded with. And so I completely empathize with how difficult it can be to keep everything in check.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I went through some difficult personal things and I was having a rough time. And I was talking to a friend of mine about that. I was struggling to certain way find the right influences. And he said, I'll summarize, I'm probably reforming his words, but he said something like, I found that if I'm spiraling into a bad place, the best thing for me to do is activities that I find fulfilling on my own or with people that I feel like a positive engagement with, like a respect and I was like, all right, I can't change all these other circumstances, but I can change where I direct my focus.
Absolutely.
And so, I started to make that shift, which is also how I met 2 of the people who are in our chat right now. Hi, Jonathan and Mikey. they were part of that shift. It was like, all right, now I can, and it took a while. Like, it's been a few years that I've been slowly, because I find that most of my best and longest term changes come from that slow incremental effort. But it really did make a difference. Partially just I didn't have time for the other stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm out of time. I can't do that. I got this thing that's really cool that I'm doing, and I've got this awesome person I'm gonna go like hang out with. Like, I can't do it anymore. There's no time. But it didn't happen immediately, and it was absolutely a conscious choice. And that person's advice, like what you're saying, the information was a big part of it, because it wasn't that I didn't see that things were problematic or causing me harm. I was just so in it for a bunch of different reasons that I couldn't generate something simple, like, which so seems obvious, right? Like, you're having a hard time, do things that are fulfilling, like, obviously, but at the time I couldn't get there.
Yeah.
I needed that person to say that. And so having a place where you can go for someone to provide that in a more, like, I guess, formal or intentional way. Obviously, we need our friends too, but that seems like a really positive offering for folks. And I really hope folks come in. Do you have a website link for it that I can pop up here? Did you already send me that?
No, the website is in development.
Okay.
I am on LinkedIn, and then we just launched the Facebook page so that you can either go to Your Mental Health Mentor on Facebook or Dr. Dora Wolfe, and that page should pop up. And I will keep everybody informed of everything as it is rolling out.
Okay. And I'll get those. So one of the things that I do is I'll put stuff like that in the little YouTube notes and the Apple podcast so people can hopefully find you. Because this feels really, I've just watched so many things that are occurring in our sort of a modern landscape that feel grounded in this loss of connection and not having a place to go for that kind of support or not being able to afford it. When I first started going to a therapist my mother was sick, she had dementia, but we also had like a really difficult relationship. And I actually was trying to figure out how to work through that process of showing up for her, and was talking to a friend of mine. And I was like, oh, my friends, wonderful though they are, cannot be my only support in this. Like, this is way too big for my friends to be dealing with, right? They can be there for me in a certain way, but this other level I need. And I found a therapist who specialized in that. And then she she does a sliding scale. So I was very blessed in that way, but it's not always available. Like finding even the right therapist sometimes can take, 6 people because there's just
Absolutely.
there's so much. It's like dating, but
it really is. Yeah. It's a relationship.
Right. It
Absolutely.
is.
Absolutely.
But it's a relationship of deep trust that has a huge influence in and just even stylistically, like there were more than one therapist that I talked to who was a good fit in a certain way. Like, I'm sure they were very good at what they did. It just wasn't the right fit for me.
Yeah.
And so it's and that process can be exhausting too. So, just even having something basic feels really like a great idea.
And I think that people even being able to have information like that, because it can be, they might go to one therapist and they don't click, and all of a sudden they think therapy isn't for me. So just that understanding of it is a process. And I like that you likened it to dating, because you are getting involved in this relationship with somebody that you are going to talk about things that you've probably never talked to anyone else about. And so the idea of feeling connected to that person, feeling safe, and feeling like they get you is something that's really important.
Yeah. So you said you sort of work a lot with trauma, and I feel like the last couple of years, especially, we've been in this intense, larger social trauma, as well as all the normal social traumas, as well as all the other traumas. How do you feel like that's showing up? Or is there something that you do you have a trauma track? Do you think people even know when they're in trauma? I don't feel like I do. I feel like I get out of trauma, I start dealing, and then 4 years later, I'm like, whoa, that was what?
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's a very good point. I do think that when we talk about trauma, I think it's important to recognize that we have all experienced, or certainly will experience, trauma in our life, right? Trauma in its simplest form is simply something that our psychological self is overwhelmed by and incapable of handling in that given moment or that given time that we're experiencing something. And we can all relate to that. And because I think a lot of times people might think of trauma as being involved in a natural disaster or having been involved in the military or something of that nature. You're right. A lot of people say, oh, I've never had trauma, or they don't realize that something in their life has really been traumatizing to them. And so one of the things, and I'm really glad there has been a push to something called trauma-informed therapy, because people will come into therapy thinking maybe I have some anxiety or I have some depression, or I don't even know what's wrong, but something is wrong, or wives drag their husbands in, things of that nature. And what we start to see is, as we're discussing things and peeling back the layers, that there is trauma in their life. And so we deal with trauma differently than if somebody had depression without. And I think what people have found more than anything is that so many people coming in are dealing with trauma. And if we don't acknowledge that and we don't take a look at that and treat that, we are missing a very big part of the healing process. And then people might find themselves in kind of cyclical patterns of coming in and out of therapy. And so I certainly advise people to seek out a therapist who is trauma informed, even if they don't necessarily think that they're going into therapy because of trauma. Because I think that then you're covering all the bases when you are heading into therapy.
That makes a lot of sense. Is that something also that in this mental health mentor role that there would be like some guidance on how to, match make yourself into the right therapy relationship for you, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's why I put your in front of it. Like, I'm your mental health mentor, right? So I really hope to be interacting with people and answering the questions that they have. And, how can I serve you? What is it that you need the answers to? We are flooded with so much information. And one of the gifts of being a psychologist is that we're trained in research. And so I can take a look at research and let you know, this is some good, significant research, or I can let you know, this is crap, right? Don't, and yet the headlines might, say something that people think, oh, this is wonderful. And not so much. There's a lot of that pseudoscience that gets thrown out there and makes headlines. And then we have a lot of really disappointed people because, again, if it were that easy, we wouldn't be dealing with all the things that we're dealing with now. And so I like to think that I do the work for people, and then I'm able to say, hey, here's some great research that's out here now. Here's, stuff that I really kind of question, and I think you should too. And I'm just able to provide as much information as possible in the realm of mental health.
No, that I hadn't actually thought about that the training in research and assessment of validity, if you will, because that's the ability to distinguish between things that have been maybe appropriately vetted or created versus things that are misleading but sound really great. And sound great for those of us who are, frankly, maybe in a space of trauma, right? Like we desperately want something that will make it more manageable in that moment. And so, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. Like that the psychologist also could offer that, whether it's overt or not, support in sort of distinguishing, like, here's what can be more effective for you versus not. So, it's a, sorry, I'm gonna think about that for a second. Work to get back here. And then here also the Facebook page. I pulled that up, so I'm gonna add that to the thing for a second. So, and I'll put this in the notes too. But this is your mental health, and it was very easy to find. She's totally right about that. Awesome. So, and is there going to be a community then, like, so people could, or in that, like, if you have a Facebook page, are you expecting that people will also be engaging with each other around these questions, or?
Yeah, I would love to have that happen. I am very new to social media. I'm one of the dinosaurs that, I joined LinkedIn about 2 years ago and Facebook about a year ago and have not been on any of the other social media platforms. So I'm learning too as I go along. And, these different groups and things that these platforms have to offer. And I do think that would be great because I think everybody needs a safe space where they can not only hopefully connect with me, but connect with each other. And that's how we learn and how we grow and, feel supported through everything that we're experiencing in life.
No, I mean, I thought social piece, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, where that we sort of clump stuff together and we actually need our own mental health and our own engagement around what we're up to. And we also need that social engagement and community values, right? Like the way that we say, oh, this this is what we kind of lift up, and maybe we don't hurt each other, right? Like that kind of thing. And just realizing that that they get pushed together, right? Like that it's, when two people talk about something, it's, it's not always clear. Is this a personal thing? Like I used to do a lot of work in the LGBTQ and sex positive communities, and people be like, I fill my needs. No one else fills my needs. And I'm like, that's fair. We all need to know what our needs are, be clear about how to fill them. And what we're talking about actually in these spaces is relationship needs and companionship needs. We're talking about, and maybe I have some unfulfilled personal needs that I need to work on. It's a me problem. However, if the answer is always that, then I feel like what you're saying is relationships don't have their own ecosystem. And I don't agree with that. I think that our friendships, our partnerships, our family relationships, our community and social relationships, we also have needs in those spaces. And we can't actually fill them ourselves. They are by nature, an interactive need, if you will. And so separating that out feels important to me, and being clear that they're all valid. It used to be I can't ask you as my mental health mentor to fill my relationship or my personal need. Like I need to distinguish which one's which. But it's also unfair to say, well, if you're not fulfilling all your needs yourself, you're unhealthy. Because I've heard that. And I'm like, I don't think that's true either.
No, I mean, we are literally wired physiologically to be social beings. That's how we survived through, evolution. And so there definitely is that social piece. And I think if people are kind of defending against that, I think that that's, something to look at, because that certainly is part of that foundational sense of well-being, is having a good support system. And that looks different for everybody. I always say to people, if you have at least one other person in your life that you trust, that you feel safe with, that you are connected to, that is your go-to person when life is good or bad, then that's saying a lot, because there are a lot of people that don't even have that. But to think that we don't need anyone else but us to be okay, I would disagree with that. Simply based off the way that, again, we're hardwired as humans, and that is to connect with other humans.
There was a thing going around a few years ago from I believe an older study that said that men's health and mental health could be assessed pretty well by asking them this one question of, who would you go to in the middle of the night other than your significant other if you were in pain, distress, or health? And if they couldn't answer that question, they were probably not going to be okay. If they didn't have anyone else. And because so many men, like, they rely on women, especially, the heterosexual normativity of, like, they often rely on the women in their lives to manage their social engagements. And they don't really have any other than that, usually a significant other, that they would actually feel comfortable seeking out in a time of distress or pain. And I'm like, I could easily say 3 people that I would feel zero issue calling in the middle of the night for an emergency. I would call to be like, I just watched Buffett, I mean, and then, a few others that I might feel like a hesitation, but would know they would show up for me. And I'm just like, okay. Whereas many of the men that I know, because I started asking, were like, I don't know. And I'm like, and like you're saying, like, not having that, and then recognizing that, that there's a real benefit to it and a loss when you don't.
Absolutely. And I think that can be also an issue for women, because if you kind of look at that role of women as being caretakers, wives, mothers, etc., that a lot of times we give, and we don't necessarily reach out for help and support as easily. That's not as a comfortable a role. And a lot of women will say, I don't have time. Like, I'm taking care of everyone else. And that's that whole kind of being able to educate and reframe around that too. We need to take care of ourselves. We can't give to others indefinitely without taking care of us. Everybody suffers as a result of that.
I did a blog on that is one of the things when I work in my consulting business with my clients is I talk about what my values, and one of them is sustainability.
Mhm.
And it's partially from doing a lot of social justice activism, because people that come in, they're revved up and they want to work 100 hours a week. And I'm like, here's the deal. If that would fix it, I'd be so for it. And
Yeah.
that's just not how this works, right? This is a
Right.
marathon, not a sprint. And if it matters to me today, it's likely to matter to me tomorrow. So I need, as part of today's work, to include an awareness that I have to work tomorrow too. And
Yes.
and so finding that balance and that fulfillment, like, what am I working for? Well, I'm working because I want the world to be better. So I need to enjoy it. I need to go out and spend time with people, or go to a concert or nature and engage with my kids.
Absolutely.
But it's seductive too, because I do think that workaholism is one of the few addictions we are comfortable with and actually almost elevate in our culture. And like, really letting go of that as an ideal almost. Like, I'm all for work ethic. I love it. And it's not, like you said, it's a draining thing. You're not going to sustain yourself if that's where you're letting yourself live. But it's
Absolutely.
seductive for sure.
Absolutely. It's like a badge of honor, just like lack of sleep.
Hmm.
People would say, I only need 4 hours or whatever it may be, or I'll
Hmm.
sleep when I'm dead. That was a kind of really popular thing that people would say. And I think it's a very good point that it is about sustainability, and it is about getting through not just this week or this month or even this year, but getting through our entire lives with quality of life.
Yeah.
You might feel you're in your 20s or your 30s and you can go, 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 go. But what is that going to look like when you're in your 40s, 50s, and beyond? And so we really want to get in there and make taking care of ourselves something to be proud of,
Hmm.
and something not to look like we are being, less than the type A personality if we are making sure we're getting 8 hours of sleep and we're making sure that we are taking the time to eat well,
Hmm.
and all of those things. And it's that re-educating of what we want success to look like and
Hmm.
what we want lifelong well-being to look like.
Hmm. No, I think that's a really important point, that the definition of success right now includes some, culturally, obviously, everyone's got their own,
Mhm.
but it includes some things that are counterproductive to long-term success and health and those kinds of things. So, well, I have this whole list of questions, but I just dove in with you because it's amazing. But I do want to ask one thing. Like, I
Sure.
know this kind of work can be draining. And so what do you do to inspire yourself? I mean, your creating sounds like kind of a big deal. There's a lot to that. Like, how do you keep yourself up in the face of challenges or roadblocks, or just some of the discouraging things that show up?
Sure. And I had to learn the hard way. When I first started the practice, this is going back 18 years ago. I truly love what I do. And so I could not wait to get in there and to work with people and to build this practice and do all of these things. And I did have a lot of success around that, but really what ended up coming in last place was me, because
Mhm.
I was also a wife, I was a mother, and it was a lot to juggle. And there was part of me that was saying, "Oh, I have it all. I truly have it all." And then there was another part of me that I wasn't acknowledging, which was I wasn't sleeping very well, I wasn't eating very well, and I ended up having some health issues about a decade into it that I needed to really take a step back and say, you're not practicing what you preach. And so I
Mm.
really had a huge overhaul of things. And a very big part of my life now is taking care of that foundation.
Mhm.
Sleep is the number one thing in our household. We
Mm.
prioritize sleep. We have a whole regimen around sleep, and combating some of these things that we all are, like the blue light, and what have you. So
Mhm.
sleep is really important. We prioritize connection in our family, having time together. And that took a while too, because, this idea of just having the time to sit down and eat dinner as a family, and having those conversations. We don't get to do it all the time. Everyone's busy doing their stuff. but we can prioritize it to say it matters enough to us that we make sure that we are engaged in it as much as we possibly can. It's very easy to let those kind of things go. And same thing with how we eat, getting exercise in every day. And for me, meditation has been a lifesaver, making sure that I am practicing that every day.
No, it is. It's a huge benefit. And that's a great list. Thank you for sharing your process, and I'm excited to see your website. Make sure I'm on whatever list you have, or do I go to your website or whatever? If I want to make sure, I should probably take responsibility for that. That's not fair. Let me double check.
I promise I will keep everybody posted through that Facebook page.
Okay, that's right.
You know how to get.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I liked it, so I'm in.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then we're going to do a show in a couple weeks with Jeff Leitner. He is a social innovator who has been working with, I don't even know, he's one of those folks who he does so many things, it's hard to like pin it down. But he talks a lot about social norms and how we change behavior. And he has a lot of different experiences with innovation and creating opportunities for people to discover how to grow. So obviously great fit for the show. And that's going to be the 21st. And then like I said, this will be up on YouTube immediately, and then Apple Podcasts soon-ish, depending on how the week goes.
Yeah.
And definitely, folks, follow Dr. Wolfe on her website or her Facebook page, and I'll put that in. And hopefully, we'll hear back more about what you're up to. I can't wait till it launches. I want to see how it gets received and how people show up around it, because it sounds like a really positive thing.
Well, thank you so much. And I truly appreciate being here. Like I said, this is the first opportunity I have had to talk about it.
Oh, wow.
And so I am truly grateful and excited. And thank you to everyone who listens. And again, please come along for the journey. We're here to learn from each other and, support each other through this crazy thing called life.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much.